Hello, everybody. We are finishing up Mummy Week here in the month of October. We are talking about the Tale of the Mummy, also known as Russell Mulcahy's. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Tale of the Mummy from 1999. Now, looking at the cover of this 6-movie pack featuring several movies that are clearly cheap, similar sounding titles to other larger movies. I did not have high expectations of this movie, and I kind of expected before this whole thing started that this would be at the bottom of my list. It is not, so after I talk about it, I am going to rank these in my order of preference. But there's not a whole lot to say about this one. But before I get into my notes, the biggest thing is that this was the most different in terms of a mummy story, other than maybe the Tom Cruise one. But it was very unique. A lot of these movies had things in common, similar story beats throughout them. This one was pretty different. Unfortunately, it is very heavily reliant, not very heavily reliant, but pretty heavily reliant on CG effects shots. And it either was not quite there in terms of the technology or in terms of the budget. The budget was really cheap. I think it was like $8 million. So if they had waited maybe 5 years when you could do more effects for a cheaper price, or maybe added $5 million to the budget, or maybe split that in half, add $2 or $3 million and wait 2 or 3 years, this could have been a lot better. But as it is, if you're the kind of person that bad effects are gonna ruin a movie for you, the effects in this do not hold up. They start off not too bad earlier on, but they become more prominent and more in focus throughout the movie, and it kind of just goes downhill. So that was kind of sad, because I would have liked to see a version of this movie done with proper effects. The acting isn't bad. Some of it's pretty good. Some of it's not so great, but overall, it's not bad. Like I said, the story is unique and interesting, but the effects just aren't there. And unlike some of the older ones, they really tried. They really went for it. So it wasn't the lowest on my list, but could have been a lot better with a little bit more time or a little bit more budget. But let's get into my notes. Once again, this is now, I think, the third or fourth movie that I found this with, so maybe this is more common than I thought, but there's no subtitles on the disc. And I'm just like, maybe that's just a thing for very, very cheap movies, but I'm like, if you don't care enough to put subtitles on your physical media, like, what are you even doing? Come on, just put the subtitles there. We get the mummy named Talos in this film. We do once again have 3 separate time periods, which is one of the tropes that it keeps from some other mummy films, but it's very different in other versions. So we start in 1948, jump forward to 1999, and then jump forward another 7 months with another flashback later in the film. Okay, so some actors in this. Sean Pertwee, who I'm going to come back to, Jack Davenport, Christopher Lee, who's in a bunch of the old Hammer horror films, Shelley Duvall, and Gerard Butler. So quite a few names in this. I don't know if all of them were big names back in 1999. Shelley Duvall would have been big by then, but Jack Davenport, Pirates of the Caribbean, is really the only other thing I know him from, which was 2003. Gerard Butler, I don't know when 300 was, but it was after 1999, so he wasn't quite there yet. Christopher Lee, obviously, has been famous for decades, so he would have been probably a nice name to put on their posters. But I want to talk about Sean Pertwee for a minute, because which one was it? This one, Bram Stoker's Legend of the Mummy, has an actor in it whose voice and accent and way of speaking is very similar to Sean Pertwee. Now, the only thing I've seen Sean Pertwee in is the Gotham TV series. But, if I can grab a prop here, I've actually met the guy. That's me and my brother meeting Alfred from the Gotham show. So there's an actor in The Legend of the The Legend of the Mummy that sounded very similar to Sean Pertwee. And I looked up to see if it was him, because he sounded so similar, but he didn't really look like him. And it wasn't him, but I had him in my brain as I was watching through these movies. And then I start this one up, and I see his name in the credits, and I was like, what a strange coincidence. The same year as that other one has a guy that sounds just like Sean Pertwee. Sean Pertwee is in another cheap, low-budget version of a mummy. It was, I don't know, it's just a very strange coincidence. And I think he does pretty well in this film. He might be a little over the top for some people, but it's this kind of person who's not going insane, but it's like they're the only one who knows what's going on, so everybody around them thinks that they're going crazy. I think he does a pretty good job. Kept me interested, whereas a lot of these movies I got very bored during, but watching Sean Pertwee kept me interested in what was going on screen. Okay, so at one point I started writing down old pieces of technology that are used in this movie. We get a fax machine, we have pagers, and we have a 3.5-inch floppy disk. Obviously, I don't hold those against the movie, but it was just like, wow, 1999. Again, if this movie had waited 5 years, not only would the technology in the movie be better, but the technology of the fax, it's just like, so I feel like it jumped, because like Pirates of the Caribbean, speaking of Jack Davenport, was 2003, and that stuff still looks pretty good. With, you know, the undead skeletal pirates and things like that. And I realized that movie had a much higher budget, but I think even in, you know, a few years, the CG would have looked a lot better. Okay, so I wrote down effects not horrible. That was early on. Like I said, they get worse through the movie. At one point, a character says a line that I wrote down. The history books have just been rewritten. Now, I feel like something very similar to this line is said in the Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser. And I've just realized that I've mistakenly said that the Bram Stoker's Legend of the Mummy came out in 1999. That was 1998. So, I apologize for that error. But the one with Brendan Fraser, I feel like Evie says something similar to that in that movie. I'm not saying that this movie copied that one. It's just weird when movies that, you know, have similar subject matter but deal with it in different ways still have weird coincidences like that. But I also know for a fact that that was a line said in the Signs film, which I rewatched not too long ago. So maybe I just have that concept in my head and I'm projecting it into one of these movies. But I feel like something like that was said in the Brendan Fraser version. Not that that matters at all. It's just a note that I made. So then we get into the meat of the movie, and I wrote down living bandages because there's no mummy in this movie. All that's left are the wrappings, and throughout the movie, the wrappings animate themselves with very poor CG animation and like hunt down these people and take their organs until eventually he's solidified into a slightly more traditional mummy. So it's very unique in that the thing that's hunting them, it's just bandages. It's not a creature, so it can go through, like it gets into someone's house through the mail slot at one point. And I think it travels through air ducts and stuff like that. So it moves about very differently than most of the mummies that we see in other movies. And again, it doesn't look good because of the effects, but that idea I think is interesting. And if it was done with a higher budget and with better effects, I think it'd be really cool. And I kept having the thought, I don't know much about the DC character Ragman other than what was in the Arrow TV series, but like this seemed like almost like test footage for a Ragman movie, because you just see these rags moving about on their own. So it doesn't look great, but I kind of like the idea. It's a little weird, but it's different, and I like things that are different. At one point we have the rags just like swallow a character down a toilet, and like the toilet doesn't break or anything, so I guess it just shrivels up the body or something. But like it just, there's the rags, and I think maybe they come out of the toilet and they get the victim and they just bring them down the toilet, and the toilet is totally undisturbed. And I don't understand how that happens. Humans don't fit there. So that was odd. I made a note of that. And then at another point, we see it stalking another character, and then it just stops and doesn't attack that character later on. And I couldn't figure out why. You know, is it just one of those tropes of movies that a character that we're supposed to care more about gets away with more because of plot armor? Again, because there were no subtitles in this, there were some things that I assume I missed. Some details and things like that I might not have gotten the full effect of, which is why I like it when I can have subtitles on. So I don't know if they explained that or not, but it's just kind of weird when you see it take down this person and this person and this person, and then it goes to get this person, who's not even really a main character. It's just a character that we've seen before, unlike most of the other ones. And then it doesn't take them down, and you're like, okay, why though? So, a little weird. Okay. So, Sean Pertwee's character in this movie has visions. And at the beginning of the movie, it's played off as one of those people that just kind of asks leading questions and then pretend like they know more things about you. So he like guesses someone's birthday, and then so that person's just like, oh my gosh, how did you know that? And then another character is like, oh, it's a scam, it's a trick, blah blah blah, blah. Things that people in the real life do. But we find out later that he actually does have visions, and he's able to at some points see through other people's eyes, and he works with a spiritual healer who, spoiler alert, if that hasn't been clear by now, after his character dies, this healer is able to communicate with him in the afterlife and have him communicate with them to find this person that they're trying to save. And it's just like, the movie just kind of shrugs off that this kind of stuff is also real. And so, I guess if you're in a world where living bandages and a mummy's curse is real, then sure, visions and afterlife communications probably are too. I just feel like this movie added the most supernatural stuff of all the mummy movies that I watched, which I don't really have a problem with. It's just none of the rest of it is explained. Or, the mummy's curse is always explained, right? We get the big story about why it was put in there and blah, 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 blah. And this is just like an ability that this guy has just because. And the other lady, it's an ability that she has just because. So it's a little bit more to swallow than some of the other ones. I also think, I didn't write this down, but I think this one tried to be the most horror of these mummy movies. A lot of these mummy movies I wouldn't really classify as traditional horror movies, because they're not like, there's a mummy, but there's not like a monster, or I don't know. I don't think they're really as scary as their competition of the era, right? So like, I don't think most things from the 30s are scary now, but even in the 30s, compared to other things like Frankenstein and The Wolfman, like, I don't think this mummy movie would have been as scary as some of those other things. This one, I think, tried to add some more horror elements and make it more genuinely scary, which again would have benefited from some better effects. But hey, what are you gonna do? I did write that down. That's my next note, is most horror. Another note that I wrote down was lots of guns in England. So it's pretty common for movies set in America for just any character to have a gun. My perception, and perhaps I'm wrong, is that not many people in England have firearms. But in this movie, which takes place in England, quite a few characters do. And that just seemed interesting to me. And the first character that we see with a gun is an American detective who works at an embassy there in England. So at first I thought it was just like, oh, okay, the one American guy is going to have a gun. And there's this, what I found to be funny, but I don't think it was intended to be funny. So this agent is working with Jack Davenport's character. And so they're getting ready to like go into this guy's house because they think he's done all these murders. And so the American agent pulls a gun, and the British agent is just like, whatever. And then he reaches in to grab something, and I was like, oh, I guess maybe he's got a gun too. He pulls out a flashlight. It's like, not a big flashlight, just a flashlight. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's gonna help. All right, cool, good for you. So I thought for a minute that it was gonna be kind of a joke at Americans' expense, but then at least two other English characters have guns. So I don't have a problem with guns in movies. It was just, I expected that it would not be as big of a plot point in a movie that takes place in England as it would a movie that takes place in the U.S. Then my last note I wrote, my penultimate note, I wrote vague powers. So this is a problem with some of the other movies, but I talked about in my video for the Brendan Fraser version that we are told at the beginning what his powers are, so even though we might miss that on a rewatch, we could pick up on it. So that lays it out pretty nicely for us. And this, it can kind of just do stuff, which again is not uncommon amongst mummy movies, but I just, I kind of like it more when I know what to expect, so that there's a little bit more definitiveness to the stakes, because if I just keep seeing a creature just do this thing and then do this thing and do this, I'm just like, okay, well, he's just going to get everyone because he can just kind of do whatever. Whereas if I'm aware of what he can do, that can help set up tension in different scenes. So not the biggest problem, not a unique problem, but something that I took note of. And then my last note, I just wrote ... okay. I can't remember why I wrote that. I watched this movie a couple days ago. I assume it's because the ending was a little bit weird. I don't remember super specific things about it, but at one point the mummy's got like almost like goat's legs, and I think it's supposed to be dog legs, but it looks like it's almost like a fawn, like goat's legs. And there's randomly a character has transformed into some kind of monster creature, but I don't think it was explained. Maybe it wasn't, I missed it. So there's just kind of some weird things that happen at the end that I don't understand. So kind of an odd duck, but had enough interesting things that I was interested in watching it. I was paying closer attention than a lot of the other ones, and it was not at the bottom of my list. So very quickly, I am going to rank these mummy movies. I would say for me, the Brendan Fraser one is still far and away the best. As much as I want to throw shade on Tom Cruise, I can't call that one the worst. This Legend of the Mummy from 1998 was just, it's so bad. At least the Tom Cruise one has some visually interesting elements that happen on screen, even though it's a mess. So that gets second to worst. We're going to go with, I actually prefer the British Hammer version over the Universal version. And Abbott and Costello, there's not a ton of mummy in it, but for what it is, you get some mummy slapstick at the end. And then this one, not executed well, but you know, it tried to do something different. It tried to do something unique. So in terms of which one I am most likely to rewatch if I want to watch a Mummy movie, we've got Brendan Fraser's Mummy, The Mummy from 1999, the Hammer Productions Mummy from 1959, the Universal The Mummy from 1932, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy from 1955, Tale of the Mummy from 1999, Tom Cruise's The Mummy from 2017, and in last place, Bram Stoker's Legend of the Mummy from 1998. So that is going to finish it up for us for Mummy Week. I'm pretty sure this is the last main week for October. Again, I'm recording these very far in advance, so they will be released in a different order. But I should have videos up for Dracula movies, for Wolfman movies, for Frankenstein movies, and a couple little extras for Jekyll and Hyde. And the only thing left after Mummy Week is we're going to be talking about the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So check out all those different horror videos I've got up if you're interested. But that's all I've got for this movie, and that's all I've got for Mummy Week. Let me know any thoughts that you have, but that's all that I have. Thank you for watching, and have a good day. Hey everybody, Sam Tom here. Just wanted to let you know that I have 2 channels. If you're watching my music content, I also have a movie channel where I talk about movies and TV shows. If you're watching my movie content, I have a music channel where I do song covers, instrument demos, things like that. So feel free to check that out. Obviously, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that YouTube stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.